People did pad work. There are still boxers today that don't do pad work, and you don't have to. Um, but it's something that can help you sort of visualize actual scenarios. But a lot of people do pad work. It looks fancy and stuff, and they can do the moves and stuff, but they don't understand what each move is about. So pad work sort of combines. So you have the punching bag, for example, right? You have the punching bag, you have the speed bag, you have shadow boxing, you have pad work, you have sparring. All of these things you're able to sort of, there's the what you call it, thing that you box up. Yeah. Okay, so each one of them has a purpose for why they are there. Okay. Now, pad work helps you to rehearse or sharpen up your abilities to punch and counter an opponent, and get your angles correct. So, if you're punching, for example, a punching bag don't punch back. It might swing a little bit, and you can think of your opponent coming to you as it comes to you, but it don't really have no hands. It don't have no projection, nothing like that. So, punching bag don't do that. Speed bag, same thing, don't do that. You look at shadow boxing, nobody's boxing you back, but you can work on technique, and your position, body position, and stuff like that. Okay, I'm gonna check this good. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. Cool. So we're talking about speed bag. So not speed bag, the pads. So what do the pads do? Some people see Mayweather and they say, that's pad work right there. Look how fancy that is. Not understanding what it is. First of all, pad work don't have to be done like that. But Roger Mayweather put that pad work together because he wanted people to be fluid, to get from one punch to the other, transition from defense to offense. So he put it together like that, and you would see him throwing punches. He wasn't just letting his opponent hit the pad, whether it's Floyd or whoever it was, little kids or whatever. But he also was throwing back punches. So what? and Floyd would have to slip the punches, or roll under the punches, etc. Okay, and Roger's good at roll in, roll out, and all of that stuff, right? So the pad work is sort of like a control simulation for someone to perfect the angles and the movement that is necessary when countering or whatever, and you get to repeat it over and over and over again. And you saw Floyd use the shoulder over and over again, and all the different things that are involved in the pad work. So you can combine it. Now, pad work doesn't have to be like that, though. So it wasn't just fancy work for the cameras. It was actually It demonstrated a collage of skills that Floyd had. But Floyd wasn't moving around all over the place because he's standing right in front of Roger doing the pad work. But I mean, they kind of turn with each other and whatever. But that's the array of skills that Floyd has that Roger would put on display. Okay, so that's what pad work really is. Pad work is about developing your skills and stuff. It doesn't have to be continuous like that. It could simply be you're letting a guy shoot his jab and shoot his jab properly, and you're just using the pad work for that. Now you don't have to use pad work to do these things, but as of recent times, it's become very convenient to do so, and it doesn't have to be as colorful as you saw Roger do with Floyd. It doesn't have to be that way. Okay, but each individual offense or defensive move is specific with specific angles, specific distancing, blah 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 blah. All right. So a specific way to shift your weight and all of that stuff. Floyd made it look easy, but it's not easy. Okay, what Roger was doing. But pad work of itself is again to get you to get the right angles, defensive, offensive skills. Now I listened to Lake Campbell and Lions podcast, and they didn't seem to grasp the significance of pad work because Nate Campbell don't teach with pad work. He just doesn't, and you don't have to. Okay. But you'll find that boxers are a lot sharper, a lot more accurate, having used pad work because they would be very specific with the angles they throw and stuff. But you can use other methods, okay? Roy, he never used the punching bag. Roy never used his hands and punched a punching bag. He used a speed bag. He'd use the little kind of bobbly thing. I forgot what you call that, with the coordination for your head and all of that. He would use those things. Ryan Garcia, yes, he punches a punching bag, but he also has that little bubbly thing that goes back and forth. It's an interesting innovation. And we got several different innovations now in boxing, so that you don't have to use necessarily the traditional things. You have options. But the point behind it is, this is what pad work is for. All right. Does it work in the fight? Absolutely. Okay. Because you're constantly shooting at a target. So where the pad is like your opponent's head or his body, depending on if you drop it low or if you turn it this way. It's to simulate you throwing uppercuts. You know, if you have the pads like this, okay, or like this, I think it's like this. You did it like this, then you're simulating hooks and so on, right? So it helps you to get the right technique and still generate power, and so they can feel in the pads when you're really teeing off and you're really throwing the punches correctly. That's what pad work's about, right? So for anybody who doesn't know that, well, that's what it is. And it doesn't have to be pretty and fancy like how Roger was doing with Floyd. You know, it doesn't have to be all those things. Now, I see a lot of casual people getting to learn the moves of the pad work, and that's cool. But if you don't know what each individual move is for, and that it doesn't have to necessarily precede a move that was before in the pad work, like how Roger was doing it, then you're really fooling yourself, you know? So you might be great at doing these combinations and stuff, but you don't know why. So I was looking at Mayweather Boxing Gym recently, and I was watching at a guy cheering another guy, and he's talking about stepping in and getting the right angle and all of these kinds of things. And he was explaining to him, you know, you want to be fluent. You don't want to stop in the middle of it. You're going to lose, you know, you're going to lose that setup to be able to hit the guy to the body and get him out of there. And so there's all these things, you know, the pad work can teach you fluency, like how to move from one, to transition from one thing to the next. So that's what pad work is, a very interesting thing. Different trainers use it different ways. But like I said before, how was the boxing stance in the 1900s? Well, it kind of came off of bare knuckle brawling. So anyway, let me just finish my thought. So that I'm just saying, pad work is necessary. It's a good thing to use in your arsenal, and if you can use it, great. But if you don't have a trainer that doesn't teach you pad work, it's not necessarily the thing that you need to know. So don't feel how about it. There are many different ways to go about training for fights and stuff and learn. Okay, so what Nate Campbell uses is sparring in a real live set situation for a fighter to get his distance and range and stuff. They just spar. But you don't have to. You can use the pad work and then spar. Okay, you can use, because the pad work. One of the things I like about the pad work is it kind of sharpens you up. It sharpens you up to be able to throw punch, especially if you don't have an amateur background or anything like that. But sparring, of course, getting in there in the real life situation is better than pad work if you're just doing pad work alone. But you can be sharper. You can sharpen your skills, and you can get the right distances and stuff off of pad work, and then apply that in sparring. So, elite fighters use pad work these days, and you see they're a lot sharper and stuff because of it. All right. So, question by Poopy Sistrunk, who I haven't seen in a long time. How was the boxing stance in the 1900s? Well, okay. Now, there were many different stances in the 1900s, but as you know, the boxing stance in the 1900s looked more like this. All right? It was an upright stance. The fighters fought like this, with their chins up in the air, and they fought like this. Okay? 1800s, 1900s, even up to the 1920s. Guys, that's an interesting point you actually made, because if you look at how boxing progressed per era or per decade, you see the stance change. For example, 1920s, 1930s, some boxers actually adjusted and had more of a, even the 1900s, some of the 1900s, boxers had more of the shell defense, right? Now, there are different variations of the shell defense and all, but essentially, they fought like this. Right? They fought like this. Okay. And that went all the way into, I think, the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Essentially fought sort of like that. There were some of them, but in the 50s to the 60s, we started to see more of this. High guard. Okay? So, we didn't really see the high guard defense for a long time. And then now we have the modern fighter stance, which is more like this. Okay? This is the modern stance, a little bit more squared up. So there are different stances. Now, Floyd has like the old time shell defense, but he also has the modern stance like this. Marvin Hagler had a stance something like this, right? And he would fight you like this because he could switch from orthodox to southpaw very easily. He could shift very easily, right? Oscar De La Hoya had a stance like this. Edwin, what's his name? Whatever. Edwin used to fight like this. His stance like this. Jake LaMotta, he had a style more like this. Okay. Tito Trinidad had a style like this. And he like if you try to clinch him, he push you off with his forearms. Really sick. He was strong too. He was big. I think Miguel Cotto has a style like this. Wilfredo Benitez has a style like this, right? So you got a little bit more variety as time went along. Yeah, guys would tuck their chins a little bit more. Guys would tuck their chin, not just protected with this, and just a lot. Every decade or era had something different that fighters brought to the table, and we don't really talk about it much, but boxing has evolved quite a lot. Yeah. Now we got all kinds of different styles. We got Danny Garcia, but then there's a combination of styles, so they can give you a combination of different looks. There are fighters who fight like this, like Sergio Martinez, hands down. Right? Hands down. Roy Jones Jr., Sergio Martinez, right? Alright? So you fight with your hands down. When a fighter's walking down another fighter, sometimes they put down their hands too and just walk them. So you know, you got different styles. Sergio Martinez be leaning in on you like this, right? Yeah, you got different styles of fighting, but you might see some fighters combine different styles, and so it's not just what stance or what you have. You have guys who have variety of stances. There's a variety of stances today. Oscar De La Hoya was saying something, but I'm gonna do a video for that, right? So let me just cut this stream, and I'll come back and address your question. Kubi Drunk in a minute. So let me cut this video.